Zoom. All right, and again, welcome again to our virtual meeting. I hope you're all doing well. I hope you're all safe, you're all healthy. I hope your classes are going well. We are now about 1 month away from finishing the spring semester. So to wrap up the upcoming weeks, today we're going to focus on listening and delivery cues. And these two go hand in hand because this week we'll be finishing up our analysis paper. Now, as you recall, when we first started class, I asked us to select a live speaker to observe for this project. But because of the fact that we're all isolating at home, we're not going out in public, it is acceptable to view a speaker online. And I'll share more information about that assignment later, including what websites you can consider using to select your speaker. I will also go ahead and give you an update on the grading criteria. Whereas before, I had students submit proof of attendance. If you did attend a live event, you're welcome to include that proof of attendance, but it's no longer required because again, we're all isolating at home. We want you to be safe. So you're welcome to go ahead and view a speaker online. Now, let's go ahead and talk a little bit more about how well do you listen. So when we started a class, two of the questions that we asked you were, what do you want to get out of this class? And who are you? And over the past couple of weeks, we've continued to explore this who are you question. So if you recall when we delivered our me speech, we went ahead and asked ourselves, who are we? And what parts of ourselves do we want to present to our classmates? We also learned about our speaking strengths, areas that we can continue to improve upon with the final speech. And so today's class, including the rest of the week, will focus on this who are you question. Because one of the ways to develop your communication skills is to figure out what are your strengths as a communicator and what are areas that you can improve on. So if you're an effective listener, then you can take that moving forward and go ahead and let your future supervisors know, or when you're getting interviewed, you can let them know one of my strengths includes listening and what type of listening. And if we need to work upon that, then that's okay. We'll teach you how to go ahead and work upon your listening skills. So how well do you listen? We'll figure that out in just a moment. Again, this is content from chapter 7 and 15. So that means that for the rest of this week, I hope you'll go ahead and read chapter 7 and 15 to catch up with the materials. Chapter 7 focuses exclusively on the listening portion. It teaches us about the difference between hearing and listening, the different types of listening styles, and how to improve our listening. And chapter 15 is a wonderful chapter that helps us understand what are some dynamic delivery cues that we can use when we're presenting to the class. And as you can see, this experience is going to be different from presenting face-to-face. Now we don't have a live audience sitting right in front of us. So I'm going to give you some tips later on about how we can continue to connect with our classmates when we're engaging in a video conference setting. So what can we expect in class today? Remember, we want to give a preview in your presentation. So here's my preview for you today. Again, we'll start off with announcements and a recap. So I'll go ahead and give you an announcement on the grading criteria. If you have seen the messages, I want to continue to remind you that letter grades can now be requested on Canvas. There is a form available, and I'll share a web link with you all regarding frequently asked questions. When is the last day to request a letter grade form? Can you request it for multiple classes or just for one class? I'll get all those questions answered for you today. Those are some questions that were asked previously. Then we'll get into the good stuff, the building your listening skills. In order for us to be able to develop our listening skills, we first have to figure out where are we on the listening scale. Are we effective listeners? Are our listening skills so-so? Maybe they need a little bit of improvement, or are the listening skills just completely awful? Maybe all we do is engage in hearing. So that's what we're going to focus on today. We're going to figure out where we stand on the listening scale. Then we'll talk about the stages of listening and understand the difference between hearing versus listening. And then we'll talk about barriers. So what are some barriers that we encounter when we're listening to someone, and how can we improve them? The next half of the class will focus on the dynamic delivery cues. We'll kick off first with communication apprehension. What is speaking anxiety? How many of us experience speaking anxiety, and what are our symptoms when we experience speaking anxiety? So we'll talk about that so that we understand that speaking anxiety is normal. We're all likely to experience it, but I want you to understand it does not determine your level of success. If you have high speaking anxiety, meaning you get really nervous, you start sweating, you feel red, that doesn't determine that you're going to fail in your speech. So we'll give you tips on how to overcome that anxiety and develop your confidence. Then we'll discuss the modes of delivery. What are those? Well, they are basically ways to deliver a presentation. There are 4 unique modes that you can use when you deliver a presentation, and we'll discuss which one is the best one for this class. And then finally, we'll end with charisma. How do you demonstrate charisma when you deliver your message? And when you're analyzing the speaker for the analysis paper coming up this week, how can you determine if a speaker is indeed being charismatic? Are they giving eye contact? Are they using gestures? Are they smiling, giving appropriate facial expressions? How are they connecting with us? So we'll examine that charisma piece, so it'll help you for your analysis paper and also when you deliver your presentation. So before we get started with the announcements and the recap, are there any questions? Okay, so I don't see any questions yet, so let's continue. Here's the recap. So update on letter grades. As of yesterday, April 8th, you are now able to request a letter grade for our class and for any other classes you may be taking. Now, please note there are some due dates that you want to get that request form in, and it's going to vary based on which session you're taking classes. So let me go ahead and share this information with you based on the link that we have here. Let's go visit my web page here. And this website that talks about frequently asked questions regarding letter grades, I'll go ahead and share that link with you in the chat box so that you're welcome to save it. And here are some key items to navigate through. You'll notice that, again, we're now able to request letter grades. And if you do not request a letter grade, then you will be receiving either a P for pass, if you receive an A to C, or a P- for a D, or a WC for an F. Now, how does that impact your grades, your GPA, your transferability to other institutions? Well, you'll notice that if you continue reading here, it'll tell you that the pass, P-, or WC will not be counted towards your GPA. However, if you were to receive a P-, which would be equivalent to a D, or a WC equivalent to an F, then those are not courses that you can transfer over to the 4-year institution if that's your goal. So do make sure that you read through this section. It gives you more information about what the new grading scale means. If you want to just receive a pass or P- for a D or WC for an F, you'll want to go ahead and get informed here. Like I stated before, you're still eligible to receive a letter grade. I know about 2 weeks ago when we were meeting together, one of the concerns was, what if I want to transfer, or what if I'm taking this class to boost my GPA? Well, that's why they have now allowed students to go ahead and submit a request for a letter grade specific to the classes they select. And if you're taking a class that ends on April 19th, so this is going to be if you're taking a NOVA online class that ends in about 2 weeks, then you have to get that request in by April 17th. So you'll want to take a look at that due date. If you have a class that's ending this coming week on Sunday, then you'll have to get that request in by April 8th. So again, be mindful of those due dates. Now, our class, most of the classes are going to be ending on May 11th. So we will go ahead and have you submit it by no later than May 4th. What does that mean for you? If you want to receive an A, B, C, D, or F, a letter grade that's actually going to count towards your GPA and is going to reflect a true letter grade both in your transcript and your academic requirement report, then you have until May 4th to make that request. The other items that are included in here, a great question that was asked, can I choose which classes I receive a grade for? And yes, you can go ahead and request letter grades on a course-by-course basis. So for instance, if you're taking, let's say, CST this semester and a math class, maybe you want to take the pass-fail for the math class and you want the letter grade for CST 110. Then in that case, you can request a letter grade for our class and you don't have to do anything for the math class because it'll automatically generate a pass or fail grading scale. Are there any questions right now for this link itself or information about letter grades? If you're wondering where to access the information, the form itself, here's the second link. You'll notice in this screen right here, it says letter grade request form. So I just sent that other link to you. So again, you're welcome to go ahead and submit that as soon as possible, as soon as you've made that decision. But if it's a 12-week, a 14-week, or a 16-week class that ends on May 11th, so if the class ends on May 11th, then you have to get it submitted by May 4th. All right, I don't see any questions in the chat box yet. So let's continue back with our presentation. All right, scheduling updates. So there was a bit of a misunderstanding earlier in regards to the analysis paper. If we would have returned to campus this week, then we would have submitted our analysis paper today. But I've actually extended the analysis paper. It is now going to be due on Tuesday for your class. So next Tuesday, you'll have a couple of extra days to work on it in case you haven't gotten started, find that speaker, and then go ahead and answer the questions that I'll share with you later today. So there has also been an updated schedule posted up on our Canvas page. If you visit our Canvas page, let's go ahead and visit that right now. Go. So if you visit our Canvas page, you will go ahead and see the following. Let's see. Let's give you the student view. Here we go. So we've updated the syllabus tab with one item, which is now the tentative course schedule. This now reflects the true due dates and when we have our class meetings as well to minimize any confusion. And then most importantly, you'll notice that we no longer have the grading point scale that was listed before. So before we had the track your grade worksheet, we don't have that anymore because with the change to remote learning, we have now changed some activities. So for instance, this week we would have done a journal activity instead of submitting your analysis paper. So I've tweaked a couple of the assignments just so that we're able to manage our workload as well and continue to prepare for the final speech in our class. So if you're wondering how many points are there going to be total, I should have that calculation by no later than next week so that you can have a true reflection of how many points are there possible, where do you stand in the class, and if you're aiming for a letter grade in A, B, or C, then what do you need to do to get to that point? So if you have any questions or concerns about your grades, let me know as soon as possible so that we can address them. But otherwise, you're welcome to go ahead and download this document here if you'd like to have a hard copy so you know when everything is due and when our virtual meetings take place. All right, next item. In regards to your informative speech proposals. So I should finish grading those by tomorrow. And I want to go ahead and tell you all that you've done phenomenal. When I was looking through your assignments, those of you who followed the format did excellent, especially when you were telling me how you selected the topic. Now, why does this matter? If you recall in the last class, we talked about how employers want individuals who are able to present their message in a concise and a coherent manner. And so those of you who submitted the proposal of how you selected your topic, you did so in a concise and coherent manner, meaning that you have carefully examined your target audience. Now, why does this matter? Because let's picture this. In a couple of years, let's say you want to present a proposal to either your boss or maybe your group of employees. Maybe you're their supervisor and you want to share an idea with them. What's the first thing you're going to have to do? You're going to have to figure out who is the target audience that's going to be affected by this proposal. And so by starting to practice these audience analysis techniques, you're able to utilize them in the future as you carefully analyze your target audience members and the effects this topic or this proposal will have for them. So I'm absolutely proud of the work that you've all put together with that informative speech proposal and your ability to select credible sources. So why did we do this assignment? How is it going to help us with the outline? Well, if you met with me last week, I explained to you that the content in the summary paragraphs of your annotated bibliography will become a part of your outline. That will be the bulk of your speech, which is the body. So if you included detailed facts, detailed statistics, detailed quotes, now you're ready to go ahead and transfer that content into the outline. As for the evaluation paragraph, That helped us to demonstrate that you're critically thinking of sources, you are selecting a variety of sources, and you're determining, is this accurate? Is this source trustworthy? Which is what we want you to continue to do even after we leave this class. I want you to continue to analyze the sources that come to you, that you read. Are they trustworthy? Who is the author? How recent is that information? Now for this class, that evaluation paragraph should hopefully help you when you are creating your verbal citations. So as you're preparing your speaking outline, the one that you're going to use on speech day, I want you to write down who said this information. And you can refer back to that annotated bibliography, figure out who was the author, what piece did they write, and that information can help you construct your verbal citations. So I hope this experience will help you again in the future when you are presenting proposals in the workforce and also with your research skills for other classes. Finally, let's look at the frequently missed questions for our class. So we've been doing well with the hybrid activities and the quizzes. If you have not been able to keep up with them, maybe you had a technical problem or something came up, you had an emergency in the family, please stay after class, let me know what's going on. And if you're watching this video, then send me an email, because again, remember, these are tough times that we're living in. If there is a family emergency taking place, then remember, I always said family first, then let's go ahead and talk together and catch up as well. Now for quiz 4, we had 2 commonly missed questions, and I wanted to address the fill in the blank. So the first question is, what are examples of audience demographics? So I want to ask you all, what are examples of audience demographics? You can enter them in the chat box as well. Age, John said age, excellent, good work. Religion, yep, the religious group is another one. Anything else? Education and gender, nationality, good. So again, these are categories that reflect information about our unique characteristics. So these are categories that we place a group of individuals under. So remember, demographics are categories, whereas psychographics are more of attitudes. So if we're referring to how does a person feel about this topic, like how do you feel about religion or how do you feel about technology, then that's going to be more of the psychographic one. The second one is the following statement. So tigers can attack in a minute without warning. They should never be kept as a pet. In my 22 years of working with tigers at the Columbus Zoo, I have learned that tigers can be very volatile. What type of statement is this? Is this a preview, a purpose, a credibility, an attention getter, a transition? What type of statement is that?
Credibility.
Credibility.
Yay! Those of you who said credibility and entered credibility in the chat box, you are right. This is a credibility statement. And so how do we know that? Because this person is referring to their own personal experience of working with tigers. So why is this important for you? Because remember, your credibility statement goes in the introduction. So each and every one of you should have one credibility statement telling us, why are you trustworthy? What experience do you have with your speech subject? Or why are you interested in this subject? And that will help the audience trust the information that you're about to share. So remember, you can build your credibility based on experience or your interest plus the research of your topic. Now the next question, what are the 5 parts of a speech introduction in the correct order? So what's step number 1? You can shout it out, you can type it out. Tell me, what do we start our speeches with?
Attention grabber.
Yay, see, John, and was that Navita?
Yes.
You're on fire, Navita. Attention getter is correct. The attention grabber, attention getter, they mean the same. We want to hook our audience with an interesting fact or a question or maybe a narrative. And then what comes next? The purpose. Good work, John. Yep. So we want to connect with the audience. The purpose statement that you wrote for your proposal, if I said this looks great, plug it into your intro, you've got one part checked off of your introduction. So you want to help the audience understand Why does this information connect to us? How is it relevant? How can I use this in the future? And then in step 3, what statement comes next?
Thesis.
So we've got a thesis that can come right after. And before that thesis, what did we discuss? The credibility. Yep, John. So we give that credibility statement. We let the audience know why we are trustworthy. And then we give the thesis. This is the central idea of the speech. And then right before we transition to the main points, what do we give? What's that final step? Any guesses?
Conclusion.
Oh, the conclusion comes at the very end of the speech. So what comes at the very end of the introduction? It starts with a P.
Your purpose.
Oh, purpose is step 2. And John just gave us a response right now, the preview. So this is a correct order. We've got the attention, the purpose, the credibility, the thesis, and the preview. And remember, the preview tells us these are the main points you're about to listen to in my presentation. It gives us an overview or a map of your speech. So next one, identify 2 types of clinchers. You don't have to tell me the actual clincher or what you would say, but just 2 types. So how can you end a speech?
Quoting someone.
Good. Who said that?
Sento.
Who was that?
Sento.
Oh, Sendo. Thank you. Quoting someone is excellent. Yep, absolutely. Another way to wrap up your speech?
Ending with a question for the audience.
Yes, ending with a question for the audience. So quoting someone, ending with a question, those are 2 great ways to go ahead and wrap up your speech. Now, there was one response that I kept seeing frequently, and I wanted to address it today. We had the response of giving a statistic or giving an interesting fact. And if you use a statistic or an interesting fact, remember that information goes in the attention getter or the body of the speech. If we end up giving new information to our audience members, like a new fact, then your audience might think, wait, I thought your speech was ending. And then it just ended with the random fact. So save all of the facts, all of the statistics earlier in the presentation and at the end of your presentation, like we said, end with a quote, end with a question, end with a story, with a bang, something that's going to help us remember your presentation and the value of this information. All right, that's a recap for last week. Any questions before we get started with listening? I see we got a couple of more classmates that joined us as well. I see someone with the 571 number. Who's calling from 571? Okay, we'll just figure out 571 number in just a moment.
Wait, what is it? 571357?
Yes,
That's me.
That's you, Sento?
Yes.
Okay, so
I'm using my phone.
who's calling from 646? I just want to make sure we're getting everyone who's in here and whoever's in here is getting.
646?
Yes.
725?
646 558.
No, I don't know.
Okay, we'll figure it out in a moment. Let's continue then. So student listening inventory. Like I stated before, for us to be able to develop our listening skills, we've got to figure out where we stand in our listening skills, period. So what I'd like you to do is take this link here. It's https://bit.ly/2 JTSDB6. So that's the link we want you to go ahead and enter. And I'll go ahead and enter that right now as well in the chat box. So you can go ahead and enter it on your computer or on your phone. What it will take you to is a listening quiz. There we go. So I just sent the link to you right now in the chat box. And this is the screen that you should see. Let's go to that screen right now. You will have access to the following quiz.
Sorry, excuse me.
Uh-huh.
I don't see it in the chat box.
Oh, let's go ahead and try again.
I don't know if it's just me, but
There we go. We just tried it again. I may have sent it to the private number.
Okay.
All right, so you should have received the link now. You can go ahead and enter it in the chat box. You can either enter the shortened version of it or the long version of it, but there are 15 questions. So it's a simple quiz to complete on a scale of 1 to 4, 4 being rarely, or 1 being rarely, 4 being always. How do you perform when you are listening? If you're thinking of setting, then you can go ahead and think of the setting in terms of listening to someone's presentation or maybe in the classroom. So take a moment to complete this quiz. We'll go ahead and give you about 2 or 3 minutes.
Professor,
once
can you hear me?
Yes,
I couldn't. The link is gone.
let's see, Naveed, I'll go ahead and send it to you right now in the chat box. If anyone has trouble entering with the link, let me know and I can send it to you privately. Did you receive it, Navita?
Should I see it in the canvas?
You should see it in the chat box in the group chat.
Yeah. Let me open it.
And if you can't see it, then let me go ahead and share the screen again. So it gives you the URL code, and then you should be able to access the quiz that way. So let's take a moment to complete the quiz. Then we've listed the results here on the screen too. And then what I want you to do is reflect. So if you're an excellent listener, why are you an excellent listener? What do you do that makes you excel in listening? If we need a little bit of improvement with listening or a lot of improvement, then think about what are the barriers? What causes you to not listen effectively when you're interacting with someone? So we'll come back and talk about that in just a moment. Hey, Cameron, I just sent the link right now through the group chat as well. All right, does anyone need any extra time? If you need extra time, let me know right now. You can unmute and say, yes, I need extra time, or you can enter it in the group chat.
Yes, Professor.
Okay, we'll give you another minute. And if you're ready for the next part, then this is what I want you to start thinking about. We're gonna go ahead and break up into the breakout rooms where we'll meet with our classmates again. And you'll have the ability to share what are some of the barriers that you experience when you're listening in the classroom or in everyday life.
I gotta have a bowel move.
So we'll talk about our barriers in just a moment, and this will help us as we are identifying the unique terms that are presented in Chapter 7 and connect them to our own barriers. So again, I'll give you another minute, and I'm going to arrange the groups into the breakout session right now. All right, Navita, are you ready?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. So let's go ahead and get ready with the breakout rooms. Here we go. So again, this will be similar to when we went ahead and shared our speech topics. The focus questions for today are, tell us what your results were with your teammates. Remember, the results are as follows. So if you are in the excellent category, then you likely were in the following range of 50 to 60, 40 to 49. You're above average, but you could go ahead and work a little more at improving your listening skills. 30 to 39 is promising, but it does require a significant amount of improvement. And 15 to 29, a lot of work is needed. And that's okay if we're in the 15 to 29 stage, because that's what this class is about, figuring out how do we improve our communication skills. Let's go ahead and break out into the rooms. We've got the first team is my 571 number with Cameron, Chris, Danya, Douglas, and Jemiah. My breakout room number 2 is the 646 number with Gabby, Jasmine, John, and Navita. So say hello to your classmates. We'll check in just a moment. Hi, Navita. Were you able to join your team?
Not yet.
Not yet? Okay. Did you receive the link right now?
No, not yet.
Okay, let me see.
Maybe later.
There should be a link that says join breakout room 2, and then you can click OK on it.
The notification, no, I didn't receive it yet. Maybe I'll receive it in a moment.
Okay. We'll wait a couple of minutes and see.
Because sometimes my net works a bit slower. Yeah, I got it now.
Okay, wait. Let me go ahead.
my gosh. Hello?
But that came out of nowhere.
Oh, yeah. I was like, what? That kind of scared me in the first part, too.
Hey team, how are we doing?
Good. I only heard from Cameron or Douglas, I think. So
Yeah, Douglas.
I was about to say mine next because I just got back.
Okay, excellent. So continue talking. What are some of the barriers that we have? What challenges do we experience when we're listening?
Oh, definitely
Okay.
distractions.
What type of distractions?
Everything. I have ADHD, so like the smallest thing could just be the distraction for me.
Okay, that's good to know. So it's more like physical distractions, like if you see something, hear something, anything with the senses.
Yeah, pretty much.
And it's important to know that too, so we can continue to build upon our listening skills.
I'm not entirely sure what lag time in terms of what you mean by that question, like reviewing in my mind lag time. It says I capitalize on lag time by reviewing in my mind the speaker's main ideas.
The question on the quiz itself,
Yeah.
do you remember what number it was?
12.
I capitalize on lag time by reviewing in my mind. Okay, lag time means whenever there's silence, like let's say the speaker stops talking for a moment, tries gathering their thoughts. When you have that little moment of silence, are you reviewing what the speaker just said in your mind? Or are you distracted?
Okay.
All right, that makes sense now.
Yeah.
Yep, so in conversation, there's always gonna be like that little moment of silence or that awkward silence.
Yeah, that is awkward now.
So how do you use that awkward silence? Do you just ask yourself, why is it silent? Or do you take that moment to process, okay, what did they just say?
Sometimes when that happens, I just kind of really ask myself, is there anything else I can really say right now? Because it kind of seems like the conversation's over, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, and it also depends on like the topic of the conversation too.
So sometimes it seems like when we have that awkward silence, we're thinking about the response instead of maybe summarizing what they just said.
Yeah.
Okay, good point. Good. So we've got some good topics here. Let's see if we can hear from our other classmates. And if we don't, then what I'd like for you to do is to figure out who's going to represent your team and tell us a little bit more about your group's distractions. Got it? Okay, so I'll go ahead and send a message in about 3 to 4 minutes, letting you all know we're coming back to the virtual room. We'll see you in a bit.
during conversation. So if we just for a moment we think like no one is that much in concentrate, so maybe this thing get a little bit easier. That's what I think.
And I guess with practice too, like when you practice a lot, you will feel confident enough to speak in front of people. Although it'll be hard, like me, I'm very shy. Like when it comes to talking in like large, first of all, I feel like the accent is already like bad enough for me to get up and talk in front of people, and so I get really nervous. But with practice, I feel like I'll be okay.
Hey, team 2, how are we doing?
We're doing good.
Good. Have we heard from everyone?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. So tell me, what are some of the barriers that you have all encountered?
Um, sometimes dozing off is one of them. Like, distracted.
So those mental distractions, psychological distractions, we doze off. Maybe our mind goes somewhere else.
Yeah.
What else?
Being uninterested.
Yeah, absolutely. So if we're uninterested in the speaker or even in the topic they're presenting on, there goes any effort in the listening process. What are some other distractions? Gabby or John?
Those are the main ones, honestly.
Yeah, that's what
We talked about. Yeah.
about.
Yeah, those are the main ones that we talked about.
Okay. So psychological distractions or just being uninterested.
Hmm.
Okay. So what I'd like you to do is think about maybe specific examples of where you may have encountered this, whether it was at class, at work, or maybe within your family, and then figure out who's going to share the distractions for your group. So we're going to do a little bit of public speaking practice. Nominate one of your teammates who will report back. Got it?
Okay.
Okay. So we'll see you in about 2 minutes.
Okay, so for me, like example, like when I'm in class, sometimes I think about, okay, after class I have to go home, first I have to go pick up my child, and then go get, like, stop at Walmart, buy some stuff, go home. I gotta cook, like, all of that, and then I gotta make sure I go to bed on time to get up the next morning to go to school. So sometimes in class I just think about all the stuff that I have to do and the next day, and so that kind of throws me off when somebody's, like, the teacher's teaching, or if I'm not paying attention. That's one of the causes why I'm not, like, paying attention.
Yep, perfect. That's a great example. So aside from telling us, like, dozing off or getting distractions, like, this is a real life example of what happens when you've got a million things to do and you're trying to concentrate in class, but you're getting ready to take off to work, but you have to go pick up your child, but you also have to figure out what we're going to eat, and so on and so forth.
Right.
So that's a great example. So let's go ahead and figure out who's going to say all that. Maybe you have nominated Cento, or maybe you want to have 2 people share within your group. Figure that out, and we'll see you in a moment. Okay?
All right, thank you. Anybody
All right, so now we're back. Iman, thank you so much. I just got your email and I see that you're here in our class today. So I will go ahead and write your name down. It's so great to see you with our classmates. So let's go ahead and hear from group one. Who's the nominee? Who's going to share what are some of the barriers that your group encounters? Who did you all nominate?
Oh, I'm gonna talk for group one.
Okay, go ahead, Douglas. Take the stage.
All right, so mainly some of the things that we talked were about like the physical distractions, like people tapping or like movement, and like when you're giving your speech, because it could really take like your distraction. And like we talked about, like somebody dropping a pencil, like during the speech, and you could be mid sentence and be like, oh, what was that? But also like the lag time, like when you're not talking, is not taking that time to reflect, but thinking of like how you could go further into the conversation, I guess.
Good. So I love that you mentioned the physical distractions and you gave some examples like within the class, how someone can drop a pen. So I want you all to think about this question. What are some physical distractions that you might face when you're listening to your peers' presentations at home? Like what's going to distract you when you're at home?
Everything.
Right
I got a bunch of animals in my house too, and they're pretty crazy. Like last time we were in this call, my cat almost made me exit the Zoom call.
Oh no.
On my laptop.
Okay, got it. And so it's good to have that awareness too, especially when you're the one that's going to be presenting. So on presentation day, I would appreciate if you would all turn on your camera so at least your speakers can feel like they're still presenting to the class. But if there are distractions, like what you said, Douglas, you can go ahead and turn it off, especially if the cat starts walking around. We've had like all types of situations. I mean, I've taught with Nova online before. I cannot tell you how many cats I've seen jump on their owners in the middle of the presentation. We had dogs' noses that sneak in. I mean, sometimes my kids come like running inside too, and I'm like, oh, turn off the camera. I kid you not, like maybe about 2 years ago, this student was giving this speech and it was such a beautiful setting. It was, I think, out in a barn, and lo and behold, this horse's face just comes into the screen and all you see is a horse face for a minute, and the student's face was just mortified, like they were not expecting that. So it's good to be aware of these distractions because again, this is a different setting for us. We're now at home. We might have distractions like our pets trying to join in or shut off our Zoom sessions or our computers, period. We may even have children as well. Like for me, I've got 2 little ones and 2 dogs. And earlier when there was possibly a thunderstorm coming in, my dog was going crazy and I thought this isn't going to go very well. So any other distractions?
Right now I'm at work and so I'm thinking about my client while I'm trying to focus here. Yeah.
You've got a psychological distraction too, Central. You've got the physical that you're trying to tend to your client, but also the psychological of, wait, I'm in class, but I'm also at work. So again, we cannot multitask. We've got to focus on one task, right? So again, great work bringing up some possible distractions to be aware of. Thank you, Douglas. What about my team number 2? What were some barriers that you found?
Yeah, we talk about some psychological and physical distraction, like as Santo says, when it's like something going on in my mind for tomorrow's schedule, so I cannot focus on the listener or on the other stuff. And similarly, I said about my experience that I get distracted very soon and very terribly by physical distractions, like especially sounds and voices around me.
Yep.
Like especially in these days, these last 2 days was the most craziest day for me because I was trying to focus on writing my research paper for my another class. And in this paper, I need to focus on how I should put out all the main ideas in the sentence together to make it a meaningful message. But my daughters, I don't know why in these 2 days, they're just getting crazy and coming again and they're just crying and yelling. So as I start writing sentence and they yell, the sentence is completely gone from my mind. And then after 5 or 2, when that sounds a little bit fine, my mind is not there. So then I have to refocus and same thing again for 2 to 3 hours. And in these 3 hours, I couldn't even write a paragraph. It allowed the whole research, So for me, the physical distraction is really, especially when I experience the bad night or the horrible night, I don't get enough sleep.
Yeah.
So from
absolutely.
morning till noon, this is the bad time for me to listen to anybody because I cannot focus on what they are saying or what is their message. Although I'm trying my best, but then I have to drink coffee or do multiple stuff to be focused. So for me, these things are like a really distractive.
Yeah, and you mentioned like the physical barrier. So not just like physical distractions that happen right in front of you, but feeling tired as well.
Yes.
If you haven't gotten enough sleep, mentally we're not
Yeah.
prepared to listen to the individual. You
Yeah.
mentioned also just trying to multitask and watching over your daughters and also trying to work, and maybe your husband or a family member is talking to you and now you've got 3 different things going on. I mean, studies have shown that multitasking is actually pretty ineffective because our minds are able to focus on one item effectively. Sure, we can split our attention every now and then, but we're not completely effective when we are splitting our attention to someone speaking here, someone speaking there, trying to complete our assignment, or just mentally distracted by the amount of work. And so having this awareness right now is helpful, especially in the times that we're living in. Some of us are likely to be distracted by our work schedule. Maybe, especially for those who are essential workers, your hours are being increased. You've got quite a different schedule than what you're used to. Others who are currently unemployed, that might be in the back of your mind too. You might be thinking about, all right, I've got to file for unemployment. I've got to try to find a job. How am I going to make money so that I can continue to support myself? There are so many different distractions taking place right now, and it's important to be aware of these distractions, not only for the purpose of listening to others, to our loved ones, but also to figure out how can we create this awareness and improve our listening skills for future interactions, like when we deliver our speech. So I thank you all for your feedback that you just gave me. And let's go ahead and talk a little bit more about this difference between hearing versus listening, and what are the unique stages of listening. So if you notice here, we've indicated that hearing is what we call a physiological process. So let's get the pointer out. Hearing is physiological, which means that you're focusing more on the anatomy of the body, and it's when you're capturing sound through your ears, and that's it. So if you have the ability to capture sound, if you're not deaf, then you're able to engage in hearing. That means sound goes in one ear, and sometimes it might go out the other. So if we're distracted, whoop, and there it goes. On the other hand, listening is going to be what we call more of an active process. So hearing is passive. Anyone can hear as long as they have the ability to do so. But hearing is active because this is going to involve the ears, but it also involves a careful connection with the brain. And in this stage, we're actually receiving. So remember back in chapter 1 where we talked about the receiver decodes the message. Decoding falls under listening. We're trying to receive, in other words, figure out what did they just say, and most importantly, interpret it. So if you recall back in chapter 6 with nonverbal cues, we said when a message is being stated, it's not just about what did the person say, but how did they say it. So if you're asking your classmates today, hey, how are you doing during this isolation period? And your classmate says, I'm fine. Are they really fine?
No.
Probably not. So you've got to read through the facial expressions, the tone. How is that person delivering the message? And this also matters for when you're analyzing your speakers on speech day. So if your speakers are speaking in a monotone, just one facial expression, not much excitement, then you're interpreting how is that speaker presenting the message. So let's take a look at the stages. When we engage in effective listening, stage number 1 is hearing. So whether you hear or you listen, that very first stage is going to be hearing. And so again, hearing is when you are gathering noise, you're choosing to focus on a specific noise around you. It could be your child's voice, your significant other's voice, your mother's voice, your cat meowing right next to you. So you're going to focus on a specific noise around you. And then you're going to take it to the understanding step. Remember that understanding step is focusing on what is being said. What is the message? What did your child just say? What did your mother say? What does this bark mean from my dog? Then we've got the remembering stage. So for some of us, we have difficulty with figuring out what is the understanding part, especially if we get distracted. So we already struggle with the hearing step. With others, we may get to the understanding step. We are able to listen, interpret what they're saying, but when it comes to remembering, maybe we're not able to recall this information in our minds. So this is important to know for a couple of reasons. Number one, in the listening stage, you've got to figure out, where are you going to store this information? Is it going to go in short-term memory, or is it going to go in long-term memory? So from your personal experience, what typically goes in short-term memory? What type of information goes in that short-term memory that eventually goes away?
We didn't understand very well.
Childbirth.
Okay, so the question was, what are some interactions,
The pain.
conversations, memories that you have in short-term memory? And I think, Sento, you said childbirth, right?
Like the pain of it at that moment.
Yeah.
It's painful, and then after that, it's like nothing. It's
Yeah.
gone.
Yeah, it's like all this adrenaline comes in, you've
Yep.
just met this baby, and it's almost like Mother Nature says, nope, you don't have to remember all of that.
Yep.
So that way you can embrace that new baby. Absolutely. So that's a great example of what stays within short-term memory. Maybe you don't remember what you said during childbirth, or if you were watching someone give birth, you don't remember what they said because all you can remember was this big, beautiful baby being born right there in their arms. That's a great example. Any other examples? Short-term information. Do you always remember people's names?
No.
No? That's another example of short-term memory.
Numbers.
Yep, their phone numbers. So maybe you meet someone, they give you their name, they give you their number, and you say, okay, got it. And then you see them the next day in the hallway and you're like, I don't remember who you are, but you're in my class. So again, short-term memory. Whereas long-term memory, this is information that you deem as valuable. This is information that you're going to want to recall later on. So this can be going back to the phone number, or maybe you have a close friend and they tell you their birthday and you say, okay, I've got to make an effort to remember this person's name. So again, in this remembering stage, you're trying to determine where is the information going to be saved so that you can recall it in the future. And this is a critical step both for our speeches, because we want to be able to recall the information when we're evaluating someone, and also in your classes. So you have the ability to recall this information. We're likely to save information that's going to be useful for our major, for our career in long-term memory, and information that we just think, I'm just taking this class for credits, will probably go into short-term memory, unfortunately. Now the interpreting step. Remember earlier I said, in understanding is all about the what. What did the person say? Interpreting is all about how did they say this message. This is where you're looking at the nonverbal cues. The understanding, you're looking at the verbal message. Interpreting, you're looking at nonverbal cues. You're looking for facial expressions. You're looking for eye contact, because in our culture, if someone isn't looking at you directly, how do we interpret that?
Rude.
They're being rude. Or what else?
Careless.
Careless, absolutely. And it goes hand in hand with honesty. So picture this. Your significant other comes up to you. For the very first time, they're about to say, I love you. And their eyes go off in the distance and they say, I love you.
You won't believe.
You won't believe it. So again, that interpretation piece. So you're looking for the eye contact, the tone, the gestures, the facial expressions. That helps add meaning to the message. And that's what we do in the interpretation step. How are they saying it? Or why are they telling me this? Especially when it requires empathy. So if your friend or your family is going through a difficult time, maybe you're trying to interpret why. Why is this being stated? How does this person feel? Now, the next step is evaluation. So now you understand the listening process is quite complex. Sometimes we can barely get through remembering, and there's still additional steps. In the evaluation step, we're looking back at the speaker and we're trying to figure out, are you being honest? Can I trust what you are saying? So for instance, when you listen to your peers' presentations in a couple of weeks, you're definitely going to be engaging in evaluative or critical listening. In other words, you're trying to determine, is the speaker trustworthy? Are they citing their sources? Does it sound like they know what they're talking about? That's what evaluation means. You're determining the honesty of an individual, whether or not you can trust them as well. Now, the final stage is responding. And so one of the things that I found fascinating in the group discussions earlier is we were talking about lag time. So lag time is that awkward silence that you have in a conversation. In any conversation, it's going to consist of a source giving information, the receiver giving feedback, and sometimes there's going to be silence. So it's never constant. There's always that moment of silence. So during that silence, are you likely to think back and reflect, what did this person just tell me? Or do you feel the need to respond? And sometimes we feel that need to respond because we don't like that awkward silence. But we have to remember that silence is precious because it gives us a moment to complete the other stages, to understand, to figure out, where am I going to remember this information, to interpret what they said, and to determine honesty. The very last stage is response time. This is where you give your verbal or your nonverbal feedback. They ask you, did you understand? Yep. And that's all. It comes at the very end. We have to get through the other stages first before we respond to the speaker. So altogether, what does this mean? After looking at our results, hopefully you discussed who were the excellent listeners, who needs a little bit of help, and who needs a ton of help with listening. Regardless of where you are, remember that listening is a skill that we can develop. This is a class, this is an introductory class where we are here to create an awareness of what our listening skills are right now. And then we've got to figure out, how can I improve upon them? So once you've figured out your level of listening, how effective or maybe ineffective you are, then we've got to figure out, okay, why? Where do I improve? And this is why we asked the question to you all, what were some of the barriers? So some of the common barriers that we heard today included noise. A lot of you commented on the category of physical and psychological noise. You gave great examples of noise that we experience in the classroom and noise that we're likely to experience at home. So be aware of that, especially when you're watching maybe other Zoom classes, or most importantly, when you're listening to your peers' presentations. Try to minimize the distractions as much as possible. Of course, right now, this is a unique scenario. So if you're watching your children, or maybe your cat or your dog or your hedgehog is feeling sick, then you've got to give care to them too. On the other hand, we've got psychological noise. Again, a lot of us are experiencing this because we've got various stressors in our minds. So being aware of those psychological barriers will help us, especially when we're listening to our peers' presentations, listening to our loved ones in an everyday conversation as well. Now, the next category is pseudo listening. Pseudo means fake. So this basically means that you're fake listening or you're pretending to listen. How many of you engage in pseudo listening or you fake listen? Go ahead and either raise your hand or just shout out, yep.
Yep.
Pretend to listen. Any others? I heard one, yep.
Yep.
All right. So how do we demonstrate that we're fake listening? What do we do with our bodies to show, yeah, I'm listening to you? Wink, wink.
Nodding.
Okay. Yep, we nod. What else do we do?
For fake listening?
Yep.
I kind of just try to walk away a little bit, inch by inch, until I
Okay.
get out of the room.
Okay, good, Chris. So you are looking at proximity. Maybe you started off close to the individual and you might be nodding, but you're trying to show, hey, I need to get out of here. And you slowly start to walk away. And hopefully they get the clue, right? Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't, and they still keep following you. Good. So that use of proxemics, we may go ahead and use that when we fake listen. What else? What else do we do?
Roll our eyes.
Roll our eyes. Yes. So maybe the person is telling us a story. We're like, oh, they look really angry. And we just roll our eyes. I can't believe they said that. But we don't know what was actually said.
That's right.
Yep. So in other situations, we may have non-word sounds, like the ever popular, ooh, okay. But we don't necessarily respond with a fluid sentence. So why does this matter? Because at some point, we have all likely engaged in pseudo listening. And it's important to be aware of that, because even though we're giving off the impression that we're listening, we're not truly engaging with them. We're not understanding, we're not interpreting, we're not evaluating. And as a result, that's going to affect our response rate as well. So being aware of pseudo listening can help you snap out of it and say, okay, wait, I've got to listen. I've got to figure out what is being said, why they're saying it. Can I trust this information? Now, next one is ambushing. Ambushing is likely going to happen when you're focusing on the weaknesses of a message instead of listening to the entirety of the message. So let's say that a person stated a key word, or maybe a person stated a name of someone that you don't really like. Then in that case, you may focus on that weakness of the message and you refuse to listen to the rest of the message. So for instance, lately, as we continue to see more debates among, especially with presidential candidates, we're likely to listen to a specific message. And if one of the candidates states a sentence that you completely disagree with, then you might just focus on that sentence and you forget about everything else. This is when we ambush. Because we're focusing on that one negative point or that one weakness in the argument, we completely forget about the message. And while, yes, it may affect our opinions, it may affect our attitudes, our beliefs, and our values, we still need to make an effort to keep an open mind. So we have the ability to give each person a fair trial of listening. Now, prejudging, on the other hand, is judging the speaker before they even say anything. This can happen based on appearance. This can even happen based on vocal cues. Maybe their pitch is too high and you can't get over that high pitch. Maybe the appearance, especially in a job interview. Let's say you're the one that's doing the hiring. You see someone that comes in, doesn't necessarily look the part for the job. You may be engaging in prejudging. And as a result, you may not feel the need to give them a fair chance at listening to their qualifications. So be aware of prejudging because it can impact your ability to connect with other individuals and truly hear what does a person have to say. Now, advising. How many of you are my interrupters? You interrupt in the middle of a conversation. Anyone?
Me?
Okay. Okay. So this is what advising means. Basically, it sounds good, right? It says, well, we're advising others, we're helping them. Actually, in listening terms, it means you're interrupting someone with your own opinions. This can happen with your friends. They're telling you about their most recent breakup or about their new job. And you say, wait, let me go ahead and tell you this. So you end up interrupting the individual. That's what advising is. Even if you feel like you're going to offer them great advice, you still have to let them give you the entire message and then respond. Because remember, responding is the last stage. So we've got to be aware of that. We've got to make a constant effort to understand, interpret, evaluate. Now, again, of course, I've included at the bottom, beware of multitasking, because through the experience that we heard today, it is difficult to multitask. Our brains are not wired to focus on different tasks, whether it is completing our assignment, listening to whoever is speaking to us, tending to our sweet little pet that's at home, tending to our child as well. It's quite difficult to be able to focus on multiple things at once. So be aware of that for your classes, for when you're completing your assignments, for when you're interacting with your loved ones. Now, the final stage to understand how to build your listening skills is to be aware of the listening myths. So remember, these are statements that are false. Sometimes we believe them to be true, but they're absolutely false. The first one is thinking, I am a good listener. So if you come into the conversation, like today, you're thinking about listening and you say, well, I'm a good listener. I know everything there is about listening. Why is that a false statement? Any guesses? All right, well, I'll help you out with this one. I'm a good listener. If we come in saying, I'm a good listener, I'm a good public speaker, I'm good at relationships, I'm good at teamwork, that means that we don't recognize that there's always room for improvement. So if we feel like we're good listeners, then we're not willing to embrace what we can change. No one is perfect. We are not perfect communicators. And so there's always room for improvement. That's why this is one of the listening myths. Even if you scored excellent in the listening quiz, there's always going to be that room for improvement. Now, the next one is effective listening is hard to learn. Remember, as we stated earlier, you can learn to improve your listening skills, but it's going to take work. Just like public speaking, just like whatever career path you are taking, it's going to take steps to get to that competent level of listening or completing the tasks within the workforce. So again, it takes work, but it can happen. Also, good listeners are more intelligent. This is actually a false statement. So while there has been a relationship between emotional intelligence and good listening, so those who demonstrate emotional intelligence are likely to be good listeners, it does not relate to your overall competency. So keep that in mind. Simply because you feel like you're quite an intelligent individual, or maybe your best friend is intellectual, that does not mean that they are effective listeners. Others, older people, are better listeners. This is again another myth. We may think that older individuals are better listeners because they've been here longer, they've practiced the skill for more time, but it's not necessarily true. So keep that information in mind as well. Just because we continue to age doesn't mean we're going to ultimately master listening. Finally, we've heard women are better listeners than men, and this is completely false. Now, there are different types of listening that were effective regarding the types of sex. So for instance, women are likely to be more effective with the emotional listening. So if they're speaking in a relationship, they're trying to figure out or interpret what is being said, why are they saying this, then women are likely to be the ones that are able to really demonstrate that listening competency. Whereas men are focused on the understanding piece, what is being said in the message as opposed to the interpretation. So each sex has its own strengths, but there is no proof that women are better listeners than men. Let's get those myths out of our mind to help us improve our listening skills. And how do we do that? Well, here are some tips from the textbook. So this slide is going to be textbook exclusive. The next two slides are going to be tips that I have gathered for my students. Number one is to stop talking. For those of us who interrupt, for those of us who want to share our opinions immediately, or not even think about the lag time and figure out what was just said, we've got to stop the talking. Remember, let the person speak, even if you want to jump in, or even if you disagree with them, stop talking. And that includes the talking in your head. Second, make a listening goal. The goals that I recommend for students to make are figure out what is being said, how is the message being presented, how is this person, how is the speaker demonstrating they are trustworthy. Those are the three goals. What did the person say? How did they say it? How do I know I can trust this person? And that will help you with 3 of the stages for the listening process. Also, for some of us, we've got to remove the distractions. So if you know your phone is a distraction and you're constantly looking at it, especially on presentation day, go ahead and put it away, put it inside a cabinet, so that way you can minimize that distraction. If your cat constantly jumps on you, you might need to move to another room so that way you can minimize the distraction. Now, of course, right now at this time, we have children at home. So if someone's able to take care of the child, that's fine. But if the child sneaks in the presentation, remember, I completely understand the times that we're living in right now. Just continue moving forward with the presentation in class. Our focus is on the overall message, not just that one distraction. Also, listen for ideas. Sometimes we're so focused on getting every little piece of information that we don't look at the big picture. And this can happen in our classes. If the instructor is lecturing, giving you a lot of information on the PowerPoint slides, maybe your task is to write as much as possible. But instead, this is why we want students to sit back and listen. This is why we have these video lectures recorded so that you can go back and refer to them. And also why we upload the PowerPoint so that you don't feel like you have to write everything out. Just listen for the main ideas. And then a couple other items, listen for nonverbal cues as well as the content. So don't just listen to what is being said, but look at the person's face. How are they saying that message? Finally, when you are in conflict with someone, we'll talk more about conflict in the upcoming weeks, focus on agreement rather than the disagreement. I understand sometimes we're tempted to fall upon that weakness, point out that person's weakness in the argument, but look at instances where you can agree. And if you disagree with someone, then remember to disagree on ideas. We're not here to attack individuals. We explain to the person why we disagree with their idea. All right, so here's my tips for you as well. So this was the textbook tips. These are tips that I continue to share with my CST 110 students. The 1.0 edition is the verbal messages. So step 1, to effectively listen, the P, get paid, stands for paraphrase the speaker's message to check for understanding. So in that second step, when you're trying to figure out what did they just say, summarize it in your own words. Let the person know, this is what I think you said. Is that correct? And that's going to help to build the understanding step. The A in get paid to listen means answer with descriptive, non-evaluative feedback. So that means that if you do disagree with someone, remember it's okay to evaluate the message. You want to make sure you're not attacking them, and start with I statements. So instead of stating something like, you stated this incorrectly, say, I heard you present this information and I believe it's incorrect. And that takes ownership of the ideas instead of attacking blame on the individual. The I stands for inviting additional comments by asking questions. If you're unsure about something, ask a question. This is why in our class, I constantly ask, any questions? Does anyone have any questions? Because this gives you an ability to continue to build upon that understanding and hopefully remembering the information. The final one is D, and this is where we ask you to describe the speaker's intent, both the content and the emotion of the message at the very end. So as you're summarizing what the person just said, you might be saying something like, I understand, you just lost your job. It sounds like a difficult time you're going through. Are you okay? It sounds like you're a bit anxious about this situation. So describe the emotion to figure out, did you interpret the message correctly? And if you didn't, then it offers an opportunity for the speaker to give you more feedback on how they are feeling. So again, 1.0 are verbal behaviors that we can integrate into our lives to improve our listening skills. And the 2.0 of get paid is the nonverbal cues. Ultimately, I say you get paid to listen because it builds your relationships with your family, your friends, your employees, everywhere. This is how we connect with others. So nonverbal cues, remember to position yourself close to the speaker. Now we heard earlier, sometimes when we're trying to get out of a conversation, we start to walk away. But if you really want to show someone you're intrigued, that you want to listen to them, sit close to them. Of course, right now we can't do it quite often because we have to practice the 6 feet of distance, but once everything returns back to the norm, remember, position yourself close enough so that way the person knows you're paying attention to them. Also add bodily responses. Remember, when we're listening, we're not frozen there. Some of you mentioned that you nod, you smile, so add those bodily responses in your interaction. In our culture, we also ask you to incorporate eye contact because that determines we're actually being honest and that we're listening to the individual. So look directly at the person's eyes. And of course, if you're interacting in another culture, then you'll want to know those cultural norms, because sometimes if you look someone in the eyes, then it can be perceived as a sign of disrespect, especially if it's to someone who's older than you or has a higher position than you. So be aware of those cultural norms. I also wrote incorporate direct body orientation, meaning face the speaker instead of facing to the side. So face that speaker so they know you're focused on them. And for the D, demonstrate relaxed yet alert posture. So we want you to be sitting up, not slouching. Otherwise, it seems like you're uninterested. And then also just have open body posture, which means having your hands to the side instead of crossed, because that crossed message sends off an indication that maybe you're closed off or you don't want to listen to the speaker. Any questions, team? All right, I don't see any questions yet, so let's wrap up with the last section. How do we demonstrate dynamism or charisma in our presentation? Well, first, let's go ahead and talk about anxiety. Public speaking anxiety, what are your symptoms? Well, let's analyze what public speaking anxiety and communication apprehension means first. Communication apprehension is going to stand for, it represents CA, and it's basically the fear or anxiety that's associated with real, or anticipated communication. So I want you to understand these two terms. It's either going to be real or anticipated. What does that mean? Well, let's picture this on speech day in a couple of weeks when you're giving your speech. Maybe you're sitting right there in front of the camera. All of a sudden your hands start to shake. You start to stutter over your message. You forget what you're saying. You start looking around the room. You start feeling anxious. So communication apprehension or speaking anxiety can happen during the presentation or in anticipation. So maybe when you signed up for this class, you had anxiety. You heard the word speech. I have to give a speech. That triggered anxiety. Maybe writing the speech, maybe researching when you were doing your proposal, that gave you anxiety. So regardless of experiencing it before or during, or maybe even after the speech, it's all anxiety. So what are some of the symptoms that you all experience when you have anxiety? Go ahead and share them in the chat box or shout them out. When you are anxious, especially during a presentation, what do you Can you repeat that?
I said saying the word a lot.
Okay. So Sento states we constantly say in the presentation. And that's good awareness too, because sometimes when we have that awkward silence, we feel like we have to fill it in with something like but instead, silent pause and breathe. Figure out where you're at in your outline and then continue moving forward with the message. What are other ways that anxiety manifests itself? Jemiah, good to see you. Talking faster than expected. Yeah, that rate might increase. Why? Because some of us feel like the faster we speak, the sooner I'll be done with my speech. But if we speak too fast, remember our classmates might not be able to understand what we say, and we may run out of breath. So we've got to be aware of that. That's a great symptom that we experience though.
Or your tone might decrease.
Oh, one more time.
The voice of your tone might decrease while you're presenting.
Okay, so the volume might decrease, you said?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. So for some of us, we might start because we get nervous, and it might be an adapter. We might not be aware of it. So this is why I encourage you all to record your speech, practice it, and record yourself before you go ahead and deliver your message. So you can figure out, can I actually hear myself, and am I speaking too loud? I heard another student speak up.
Yeah, it was me. I said sometimes like the hands is just shaking, and also the body.
Absolutely. So hands might shake, the legs might shake. So guess what? This is the one positive that I see of presenting from home. You can present sitting down and no one will know that you're trembling. But let's say that you start moving around in your chair. You've got to be aware of that, because then the class might be distracted that you're constantly moving back and forth. So we've got to be aware of these behaviors. The bottom line is we're all likely to experience anxiety, whether it's low, medium, or high anxiety. But remember, it does not determine your level of success. If you've got high anxiety, then there are techniques to help you overcome that anxiety. If you've got moderate anxiety or low anxiety, there's also techniques for you. You've just got to figure out what's the best one to target your symptoms. So step one, practice your presentation. It may seem obvious, but sometimes we forget this stage, this critical stage. So this is why I encourage you, give yourself 2 to 3 days only for practicing. This means having your bullet outline ready. Make sure that you write in what your nonverbal cues are going to be, especially if you get a bit nervous. You can write where you should smile, where you should have a more serious face, where you should pause, where you want to emphasize the key words. Practice the content, practice the nonverbal cues. That way it feels natural when you present your message. You can also employ relaxation techniques. So this is going to be helpful, especially if you have anxiety right before the presentation or even during the presentation. You can practice deep breathing during your presentation, or do even more deep breathing exercises before you deliver your speech. Or maybe right now, if you feel anxious, practice those relaxation techniques. The next one is a fancy term. It's called systematic desensitization. And what it basically means is the more you practice, the more confident you will become. Systematic desensitization means putting yourself in a public speaking setting and doing it, getting more practice. So what I encourage you to do as we lead up to presentation day is to gather your family. If you've got family around you, have them listen to your speech. If you live alone, then see if you can Skype with some of your friends and have them watch you deliver your presentation. Because again, the more you do it, the more confident you're going to feel eventually. So it's kind of like the Nike motto, just do it. You just got to do it. Fourth is a self-fulfilling prophecy. And we're going to have some practice engaging in the self-fulfilling prophecy this week. Basically what it means is if you think positive thoughts, good things will come. You think negative, bad things will likely happen. So how have we seen this manifest in presentations? Well, when students start thinking positively and they say, okay, I've practiced my speech. I know this is good information for my audience. They're going to be interested. I took the time to research it. I know this topic better than anyone else. Then you're going to feel more confident in your presentation. But if you start saying negative things like, oh, the last time I presented went awful. I didn't do such a good job with researching. I can't even read my notes. That's likely going to take the mood of your speech. You're likely going to experience difficulty with delivering your message. So think positive thoughts. And again, part of our activity for this week will promote visualizing your success for your speech. The last tip is treat your speech like a conversation. Remember, speech delivery is not theater, so we do not want big, bold gestures. You can have big gestures, but you're not here to perform for the class. Treat it like a conversation. And what I mean by this is, remember, for this unique experience, you're recording your speech right here in Zoom. You want to look at that camera lens because remember, now we don't have our classmates in front of us. So put a picture of your favorite person right there and treat it like you're having a conversation with that person. That's what we want you to do for your speech. A speech is just a conversation with someone else. Treat it like you're talking to your best friend, sharing this new information with them that you're excited to share, but you only have 5 minutes to do so. So which technique is the best one for you? Well, that's all going to depend on what are the barriers that you have when it comes to speaking anxiety. Why do you have speaking anxiety? What are your symptoms? And we'll explore more of that in the activity. Now let's wrap up. What are the 4 modes of delivery? Well, we've got manuscript, impromptu, memorized, and extemporaneous. What does it mean? Manuscript is when you deliver a speech basically by reading word for word off of the outline. So let's say, for example, you had your script written right here on the screen, but you didn't want to share your screen with the classmates because you didn't want them to know that your script is right here in front of you. Well, note how if I start reading off of my screen, look at where my eyes go. They start going to the bottom and it doesn't seem like I'm talking to you. So, excuse me, as a result, we want you to make sure that you're not engaging in manuscript. Don't have the entire speech written out. Instead, have a bullet point outline on the side so that way you're not tempted to read off of your screen. We want your eye contact to be right at the camera lens so that we can feel like we're speaking with you. The other one is impromptu. Impromptu basically means that you are winging the speech. There's no preparation, no research was completed. You just come up here and ta-da, here's my presentation. Now, most of us will not deliver an impromptu speech because most of us completed our annotated bibliography. So we've done some research. We've got to complete the next step. We have to get the outline done to demonstrate that we've prepared for this message. Please avoid the impromptu delivery because remember, you still have to cite sources in your presentation to demonstrate you have researched the topic and you are trustworthy with this information. Now the third one, a lot of students say we should memorize our speech, but in reality, we should not. Why? Because if we end up memorizing the presentation, there is a chance you might forget the information halfway there. And this has happened quite frequently. As a matter of fact, a few semesters ago, one student was delivering this fantastic presentation. They were a great speaker in the class, constantly participated, but they decided to memorize. So what happened was, about 2 minutes into the speech, the student forgot what they were going to say and they just looked at the entire class. Kind of like a deer in the headlights. And then they just said the F word and they walked off the stage and we never saw them again. So even though this wouldn't be quite dramatic with our class where you would forget what you're going to say, there's going to be that awkward silence of just staring into the camera. So again, avoid memorized. You are not expected to remember 5 minutes of your speech. So extemporaneous, what does that mean? The extemporaneous method takes a little bit of all the other ones. It takes manuscript because you actually have a copy of your outline, but it's not the entire word for word outline. It's actually bullet points. It takes impromptu because if you want to have a conversation with your audience, then you can go ahead and do so. If you want to refer to some of your previous classmates' presentations, you can also do that as well. And that's impromptu. It's off the hook, basically. It also involves a little bit of memorized, not where you commit it all to your head, but you've practiced it so you are familiar with the content. So for this reason is that we say you should use the extemporaneous delivery method. Remember that. Extemporaneous delivery is what we use to deliver our presentations in CST 110. We want you to have a keyword outline. We want you to be familiar with the content. And if you want to throw a little extra in there, maybe connect with your classmates through their presentations, you can do so with impromptu. Now, what are the vocal delivery tips? What will I be looking for in your speech? And what should you look for when you analyze the speaker for your paper? Number one is their ability to breathe. Are they using silent pauses effectively? Are they breathing between their main points so it gives the audience an opportunity to gather what was just said? Did I understand that correctly? Breathing is going to help with your relaxation techniques. It helps decrease the nerves, and it helps all the other vocal cues, like volume. So remember, volume is how loud or how soft you speak. If we're feeling anxious or we have a tendency to feel shy, then we might not speak loud enough. So what should we do? Again, record yourself either on your phone, on the laptop, on a tablet, and watch yourself. Is your volume loud enough? And if it's not, we've got to increase that volume. On the other hand, if the volume is too loud, decrease it because we don't want to hurt our audience members' ears. Rate is going to be how fast or how slow you speak. Now, if you want a technical number, on average, we can process 125 words a minute. That's 125 words a minute. So if you want to count how many words you're saying, you're welcome to do so, but you have to go ahead and listen carefully to how many words you are saying. Let's see, I just got a message. Anyone else hearing that noise? Chris, classmates, is there a noise in the background? What noise is it?
Tapping?
I don't know. It's tapping, but it kind of sounds like a frequency, like a thumping sound.
Huh. Give me a moment. Let me look back at the participants.
It might just be like background noise, but I mean it's bearable. It's not like super loud or
Distraction?
anything.
Okay, so let's go ahead and see.
Because I don't hear it anymore. It's just when you're talking, I can hear it.
Okay, let's see. Did that help?
I don't know. It only does it when people are talking.
Okay, that might be odd. All right, so we'll go ahead and keep that awareness as well. See, there's all these different distractions that come about. So let's continue. Watching your speaking rate. Remember, this is how loud or how slow or how fast or how slow you end up speaking. So with your rate, like I was saying earlier, you should have about 125 words stated in about a minute if you want to count them. Otherwise, if you feel like you're speaking too fast, this is where you've got to bring in breathing to slow down your rate. But remember, it shouldn't be too slow where you end up boring the audience members. So record yourself, listen to your speech to determine if it's a consistent rate for your audience. The next item that we have is pronunciation and articulation. So this all leads into enunciation. Pronunciation deals with syllables. So we're basically looking at, are we pronouncing the word in the correct order of syllables? Why is this concerning for some of us? Well, if we are citing a person's name or an organization that we've never seen that name before, we have to practice how we're going to say that name. Instead of saying, according to, I don't know how to say that. So practice in advance. Try to figure out, how do you pronounce the individual's name? So that way, when you deliver your speech, you demonstrate that you know how to pronounce it, and that builds your credibility. Again, if you don't know how to pronounce a word or a name, there's different tools. There's a Google pronunciation tool. Sometimes YouTube has videos on how to pronounce unique words or phrases. And if you need additional help, then reach out to me and we can practice pronunciation. On the other hand, with articulation deals with sounds. Pronunciation is syllables, articulation is sounds. What does that mean? This is basically how your mouth is creating that sound. So in other words, if you have a speech impediment, like I used to have a lisp, and so when I would create the letter S sound, it would actually create a different sound. My tongue would stick out and I would say S. So it created an articulation difficulty for me when I was stating the letter S. Other instances where we may have articulation problems are if we're learning a new language. If we're delivering a speech in a non-native language to ourselves, then we may encounter articulation problems. However, remember that articulation does not determine your success in the speech. So how do we improve on this? If you want to improve your use of sounds, then let's practice together. So we articulate the word and pronounce it correctly. If, let's say, English is not your first language, or maybe it's your third, fourth language, then let's practice your presentation together, and remember to slow down the speaking rate. Regardless of whether English is your first language, second, third, or fourth, slow down that rate because it helps your audience process what you're saying. Last couple of tips: use tone and silent pauses for your message. Remember that range in tone is going to help build the excitement or the enthusiasm for your speech, and it helps to capture points that you want your audience to remember. So if there's a statistic or a fact or a story, a name that you want us to remember, emphasize that name or that keyword by extending the vowel sound. Or you can go ahead and repeat the word multiple times so that we understand this is a key point in your message. Finally, for those of us who struggle with the and the like, so, and then, those are all vocalized pauses. So going back to silent pauses, if we're tempted to say a vocalized pause or a filler word, just silent. Look at your outline, continue moving forward in your presentation. Now for the physical piece. What are we expecting when you deliver your speech with physical delivery cues? Remember eye contact. If you have a live audience in front of you, look at each individual classmate or member in the audience. That's what we call eye scanning. We want to look at people in the front, look at people in the back, look at people on the left, people on the right, everyone in the middle. So it feels like we're talking to each and every one of them. In a video conference setting, that's different. So as I stated before, place a sticker, place a picture of your favorite person next to the camera lens, so it seems like you're speaking directly at us, not towards the camera screen. For facial expressions, remember facial expressions have the ability to tell us what is the emotional state or the tone of your message. And this is going to help your listeners with interpreting your message. So if your message is providing hopeful or valuable information, then it's time to practice smiling, because we want to share with our classmates how excited or how much dynamic energy we have to present this information. Now with video conferencing, you've got to hold the facial expressions a little longer, because again, we're looking at your video, and if you smile quickly, then we might miss it. So you've got to hold the facial expressions a little bit longer in a video conference setting so your audience members can truly see them. Now with kinesics are all about gestures. So remember back in chapter 6, we said you can use emblems. Emblems are nonverbal gestures that substitute a word. So if you ask your audience a question and they respond to you, you can give them a thumbs up to show them your appreciation. If you're using illustrators, remember these are nonverbal cues that you use with a verbal message. So if you want to describe a grand idea that you have to change the world, and show us how big that idea is. If you've got 3 main points today, then show us the 3 fingers so that way it complements your verbal message. Also think about your posture. Even though we are presenting from the comforts of our home, think about where you're going to be sitting. If it's right there in your room, because that's the only private space you can have, try to sit up so that way we can still see that you have that confident posture. And of course, in a video conference setting, watch your use of adapters. Again, if you get nervous, be aware of possibly floating around in your chair, playing with your hair, rubbing your head, or if you wear glasses, watch out for the fidgeting. That can affect your confidence level or the perceived confidence that the audience sees from you. Then with gestures, remember to hold up the gestures as well for a little longer. In class, we would likely see them right before our eyes, but notice how on the camera, it comes and goes. So hold it up for a couple seconds long so the audience can truly see that gesture. Now, if you're wondering, what do I wear on presentation day? Well, if your speech is on how to get better sleep, you can probably wear your pajamas. Otherwise, remember that we want to make sure you have a working webcam, whether you are presenting in Zoom or a video recording through Studio, and dress for success. Even though this is from the comforts of your home, I want you to dress for success. One day in the near future, you might have an interview for your dream job, and it might be through a video conference like this one. So dress for success, dress the part. If you'd like to feel more confident, you can wear business casual clothing. There are some students that want to go all out and wear business professional. That's perfectly fine. But if your topic is more of a casual topic, like let's say you're teaching us about basketball, then you're welcome to wear that basketball jersey. If your topic is on the secrets behind Domino's Pizza and you work at Domino's, then you can wear your Domino's uniform during presentation day. Remember, artifacts, we learned back in chapter 6, hold communicative power. They help us understand what are you trying to tell us. And so by dressing the part, you'll feel more confident and the audience will be able to see the relationship that your artifacts have to your speech. Now the last point is visual aids. Any questions before we wrap up with visual aids, team?
I do.
Go ahead, Jasmine.
Well, my question is with visual aids, so do you want me to wait?
You can go ahead and ask it, and then I'll let you know if I'm going to answer it right now.
I just wanted to know if, like, I started creating like a PowerPoint to show, but I don't know if that's what you would like us to do.
Okay, yep. Let's go ahead and talk about that. So with visual aids, you can have various options. Just pick one of them though. If you want to take the PowerPoint approach, you're welcome to do so, but note the final tip. Use one slide for every 2 minutes of content or a maximum of 5 slides with a title slide and references slide. So that means 3 of the slides will be the content or the bulk of your presentation. It'll have a connection to what you're going to say. If you don't want to do PowerPoint, that's okay. You can bring in an object. Again, I've got my Purell over here. So if you want to talk about the benefits of hand sanitizer or why it doesn't work, you can go ahead and demonstrate that object there. If you're doing a cooking demonstration, you can go ahead and do it from the comforts of your kitchen, just having someone record you as well. So there's different types of visual aids you can bring in. You just have to figure out what's the best one for your speech. So as you're selecting that visual aid, again, carefully plan when to use it for your presentation. If it's a PowerPoint, write down in your outline when you have to transition to the next slide so that we don't have an awkward pause or an awkward moment of, oops, I forgot to click to that slide. If it's an object, know when you're gonna bring in that object and when you're gonna put it away, because we do not want you to see you holding on to that object for the entire 5-minute speech. Next, reference your aid during the speech. If it's a PowerPoint, then make reference to it in your presentation. We don't want it to just be a background picture hanging out. We want you to go ahead and refer to some of the images or the content in your presentation. You can do so like I'm doing right now with the annotation tool, and we can teach you how to do that. Or you can verbally state, point number 2 states the following. Or if you see in this graph, it captures data from, and then make reference to the data. Same thing with your objects. If you've got an object, reference, tell us the relevance instead of just randomly holding it during the presentation. Now, with visual aids, regardless of objects or PowerPoint, set it up before the presentation. So what we'll do is we'll have you go ahead and set up your PowerPoints. You can go ahead and send them to me in advance so that I can share it with the class, and then we'll go ahead and have you click through the slides. You can also go ahead and have your objects ready. If it's a picture you want to share with the class, have it ready to go so that it does not waste time. Now, fourth item is to talk to your audience, not to the objects. If you want to talk about door stoppers, remember we're not just talking to the door stopper the entire speech, even if we're feeling nervous. We still want you to talk to the audience, and the same thing goes with visual aids in PowerPoint form. We don't want you to be reading off of the PowerPoint because then the eye contact goes right to your visual aid instead of your audience. So practice giving the visual aid to us. Like I stated before, less is more. The golden rule that I've read from various magazines, including Toastmasters International, is 1 slide for every 2 minutes. That way you don't feel overwhelmed to keep clicking, and the audience doesn't feel overwhelmed by all of the information. Does that answer your question, Jasmine?
Yes, that's fine. Our speech is only 5 minutes long though, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes. And that's why we don't include the title slide or the bibliography slide, because usually the title slide is there as a placeholder. All right, class, so what's the focus for this week? Here we go, we've got a minute left. Reading chapter 7 and 15. So finish reading those 2 chapters. Remember, chapter 7 is all about listening. Chapter 15 is delivery. Your assignments for this week. So instead of doing a quiz, we're going to do a quick short paragraph where, again, we're going to explore our level of speaking anxiety. So you're going to take a PRPSA survey that's included in module number 5. And this will be due on Tuesday the 14th. You're going to describe your results from the survey. Tell me, what were your results? Do you have high anxiety, moderate anxiety, low anxiety? And what factors contribute to your speaking anxiety? Maybe it was a bad speech or speaking experience that you had before. Maybe you froze the last time you gave a speech, or maybe you're scared you're going to forget what you have to say. What are the factors that contribute to your anxiety, and what adapters or what symptoms do you show when you are nervous? So we talked about some of them today, like talking too fast or saying filler words like and. So talk about those filler words. Examine your own level of anxiety. And then let's practice the self-fulfilling prophecy or visualizing your success. I want you to design or find an inspiring message for presentation day. So it can be an image, it can be a quote, it can be a meme, it can be anything that you design or find on the web. Just make sure it's appropriate. And I've given an example right here in the top right corner. This little hedgehog saying, "Don't worry, you got this." So share images, because on speech day, I want to share these images with all of you so you feel the good vibes for your speech. So that will be your assignment. Write 1 paragraph describing your results, and then share a meme or an image that you design or you find with us. That'll be worth 10 points. Now remember your paper. This is analyzing a speaker. It could be a live speaker you observed before we all went into isolation. It could be a TED Talk speaker or a speaker from AmericanRhetoric.com. And I've shared both of the web links on module number 5. Now, if you have another speaker you'd love to analyze, just check in with me so that we can make sure it's an appropriate one for this assignment. Your task is to write 2 to 4 pages, just 2 to 4, and note it has to be double spaced. Please don't go ahead and torture yourself. Make it double spaced. It'll be 6 paragraphs, and that includes an intro and an intro, body, and conclusion paragraphs. So overall, what you're doing is analyzing the speaker's organization and delivery. In the body paragraph 1, you'll tell us how did they organize their message, what type of supporting materials did they use, what type of sources did they use. And in the delivery, you'll look at eye contact, facial expressions, gestures, vocal cues, how they presented the message. In body paragraph 3, you'll offer advice. What did the speaker do well and continue to do for future speeches, or how can they go ahead and revise their presentation? And then finally, in the final body paragraph, you'll tell us, what is your plan of action? So based on what you observed today, or whenever you watch the video, how can you use this information for when you present your speech? So if you're wondering, where do I find all of this content? Remember to access module number 5. If you go to our Canvas shell and you visit modules, go all the way down to module 5. Here it is, your chapter review questions in case you want to design the review guide for the final exam coming up later at the end of this month. Here's your visualize your success activity and your analysis paper. The important links for the analysis paper, of course, are the TED Talks link. So if you want to access TED Talks, it's here, or AmericanRhetoric.com is available here. And they usually have the transcript for the message too. If you're wondering, how am I being graded? What do I write in each paragraph? What did she just say? Then remember, this explains what you should include in the intro paragraph, body paragraph number 1, body paragraph number 2, body paragraph number 3 for advice, body paragraph number 4 for your plan of action, and your concluding paragraph. I have also indicated how many points each paragraph is worth, and you'll notice you also receive 5 points for formatting. So make sure you do spell your words correctly, make sure you check any grammar errors. Remember to continue using Grammarly.com. If you haven't used it before, use it now because it's quite helpful for this type of assignment. It's got to be a minimum of 2 full pages, not exceeding 4 pages, 1-inch margin, size 12 font, double spaced, and remember to include a title page in APA format. So that title page will be worth 1 point altogether for a total of 40. So we've actually reduced the number of points because you no longer have to show a proof of attending an event. Any questions? Stay around if I asked you to stay after class, and if you have a moment, stay with me so that way we can continue discussing a couple of questions I have. Otherwise, looking forward to the next week where we'll go ahead and talk about relationships and start working on your outline. Any extra time that you have, go ahead and start working on that intro, body, or conclusion. We'll see you next Thursday at 12:30 p.m. Take care. Thanks for joining us. Bye-bye.